All right, this is We the People News. Okay, not attorney, not giving legal advice. Education only. Okay. Uh, Anything I say is just hearsay. Do your own research. All right. Um, I want to kind of also pop out on this one as well. Right. Well, if the federal government is not allowed to really intervene a whole lot, and when you sue officers, you go sue them in the for 42 years, 1983, and all that kind of stuff. But see, this is where we lie the problem. So what we need to do, okay, I'm led to believe, due to my research, not y'all's, right? You go to the court system of suing the officers and all that, but you have to go through the whole Texas court. And if you do not find any remedy, then you have to actually go through the process of do a petition of redress of grievance and do a monstrance to have the judges impeached. Okay? And, or tell the legislature, instruct them to create a better law. That way the people can get remedy. You know, you've seen some of these states, New Mexico is one of them, they get rid of the sovereign citizen immunity. Okay, now I'm in federal court, that comes back or whatever. But in the state itself, um, they got rid of it. So if the states can get rid of it, well, that means that the federal judges has zero authority to tell the state that was unconstitutional for the state to get rid of the sovereign citizen immunity. Is this making sense? Because when they got rid of it, they made it law, right? Well, their immunity is not law. It's a doctrine. And the Supreme Court became kings and said, I declare that these sovereign citizens is going to be free from scrutiny and lawsuits and all that due to their ignorance of the law. Let's go, y'all.
In light of this clear language, no one could argue otherwise. Right? Next. Wrong. There are two main arguments.
All right. So you guys really pay close to attention to this. If you actually start using this in your court documents and all that, and use it the proper way, the supremacy clause is actually very powerful.
It's what I've just told you. I only have time to make one today. That's the supremacy clause. The other one's the 14th Amendment. I wish I had an hour. I could really, I think, open your eyes to that. But I'm telling you, if you really want to know, come and ask me, and I can show you from the very text. What's the supremacy clause? Some people say, don't you know our Attorney General in Tennessee? I don't fault him. He went to law school, same type of law school I did, same kind of wrong and bad education that aggrandizes the federal government. But it's just wrong. So, don't you know, people say that the supremacy clause makes the federal government supreme over state governments. Next. Well, those who think the supremacy clause makes the federal government supreme over the state governments just haven't read the supremacy clause. This is how simple it is. Let's read it. Next. Here it is. By the way, you won't find it labeled the supremacy clause. It's hidden in there. You've got to go looking for it. It's in Article 6, Paragraph 2, and here's the actual language that scholars call the supremacy clause. It says, this Constitution, remember, what's a Constitution for? It's a document of limitation. It's about a general government. It's about specific powers. We're going to limit it beyond that. This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof. So the laws are bound by the Constitution. We already learned that in Articles 2 and 3, right? All treaties made or which shall be made under their authority, under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land. So what's the supreme law of the land? The Constitution, and then laws that are properly made, and treaties that are properly made. Not a single word about court opinions being followed, being the supreme law of the land, but it does address the courts, and it says the judges in every state are bound thereby. What are they bound to? The Constitution. What Constitution? They're bound to the rules of the U.S. Constitution and its limitations. anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. You can ignore Tennessee's Constitution if the federal Constitution gives it to the federal government. If it doesn't, the states still have the power. Next. So let's analyze. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, not the federal government or the U.S. Congress or even the U.S. Supreme Court. Next. I'm here to tell you it's possible for federal law to become the supreme law of the land, but only where the subject of that law is contained in Article 1, Section 8, and again, a couple of other ambiguous, obscure places in the amendments, but that's the primary place. So since the Congress has no power to enact a law which is not authorized by the U.S. Constitution, no law can become the supreme law of the land unless its subject is expressly set forth in the powers granted to Congress. What do the 9th and 10th Amendments say? If it's not in the Constitution, give it to the federal government. The people in the states keep it. So, stated another way, once the federal government was created, the Constitution went on to limit the scope and power of that general common government, and the Supremacy Clause stands in support of those limitations. Next. Therefore, the action of any federal officer is legitimate only where the subject of that action is authorized by Article 1, Section 8. Any law, executive action, or court opinion regarding a subject which is not expressly authorized under that statute or under that section is not the supreme law of the land. In fact, it's not even a valid law or a valid use of governmental power. It's been called void ab initio. That means it's void. It's not that we overruled it. It was never a law at all because they went outside the rights. So I'm here to tell you, actually, the Supremacy Clause is on our side. It's on the side of states' rights. It gives us 8 provisions of the U.S. Constitution which support the existence of states' rights. Next. Now, our question, how do we, if we have the rights, how are they enforced? The primary means whereby a state may enforce its rights, short of secession. Seceding is a way to do it, right? If I'm in a contract with somebody and they don't keep the contract, I can say, well, the contract's over, I'm done. I'm leaving. Forget it.
We're going to stop right there for a second because that's actually very important for Texas. They said that they were talking about seceding, right? But people kept on saying, they're arguing that Texas can't do it. But yes, they can. If the federal government broke the treaty with the state of Texas, the contract is null and void. Okay? And the state could leave. Okay? And we have to go back with just ordinary treaties and contract laws and all this kind of stuff. You got to dig deep in there. But why do you think you're paying a ticket? Because you voided some type of contract. Right? Same thing with the states, with the federal government. If the federal government is breaking a contract, the state can secede from them. And it don't matter if it's Texas or New York or the 13 colonies or this, that, here, and there. If they broke the treaty, the contract is broken. It's no good. It's null and void. And the federal government would have to go back in there and actually clean their mess up and say, oops, oh, sorry, we overstepped our authority. Please don't leave us. Okay? And then they can kind of go through there and clean the mess up. And the states don't leave and the federal government's all happy and all this kind of stuff. But in general, okay, and I'm not an attorney, not giving legal advice, do your own research, okay? But any treaties are broken, the same thing as a contract. It's null and void. That simple.
To do that, I think we need to work together for common general things. And that's the idea here. Short of secession or military action, we have to do it through nullification. Next. Nullification is the means whereby a state claims the federal government to secede its authority and thereby makes an assertion that it's not bound by any federal law, decree, judgment, or the like. Next. Nullification is not anarchy. You're going to hear people say, this will lead to anarchy. This will lead to rebellion. Let me tell you, nullification is the lawful means whereby we reestablish the rule of law by telling the people that are ignoring the compact, you're out of line. No.
There you go. We talked about jury notification. It's the exact same thing. We're telling the judge and the legislatures and all that, this law is no good. This is the reason why we can drink beer today. Is because notification. It was a stupid law, and they had no authority. Even if they did have authority to do it, we, the people, decide you're not going to take that away from us. So therefore, since they are a creature of the people, then they must turn around and say, okay, we got to back off. People is not happy about this. We can't get anybody put in jail because all the juries are doing notifications.
Notification is a means by which we reestablish the rule of law by ignoring the actions of the usurper. Usurper, someone who takes power they weren't given. Or they could be an anarchist or a rebel. Next. Now, I hear some people argue that states can't use notification until a U.S. court says they can. We can't do it because no federal court's given us permission. This view ignores the...
And that goes, if it's not in there, then it's reserved to the people or to the state.
fact that courts don't make law, legislatures do. So federal courts have no means whereby they may validate or invalidate the actions of a sovereign state, since the people of the states did not give federal courts that power in the Constitution. Next. Others say, here's another argument, well, nullification is not mentioned in the Constitution. Guess what? That's technically true. But that statement's misleading. The Constitution specifically states that all rights and powers not mentioned, that is, enumerated and delegated, are specifically reserved to the states and to the people. The right to nullify federal or international, by the way, we've got international laws that are coming on the scene I'm very concerned about. What are we going to do when that happens? The rights to nullify those federal and international laws, rules, judgments certainly fit within the meaning of the Ninth Amendments and the 10th Amendments. Next.
Exactly. He's got it right on cue. And, you know, I don't really brag on attorneys, but he is doing a really good job on all these things, okay? Anything that's not in law, in writing, by the authority of the Constitution is null and void. And to reserve the right to the people, right? Because we have innumerable rights. There's rights that's not put in paper because there's just too many of the rights for men and women. Because our rights was given from God. And government's rights was given from us. So it just went and trickled down. And let's just keep going. But the simple fact is, that's what they're trying to do, is create all kinds of statutes to put you in imprisonment. A paper imprisonment is what they're trying to do. So they're creating all statute codes, rules, and regulations, and that way you can't even move 10 feet without breaking a law, alleged law.
And then lastly, let me tell you, it would be absurd and contrary to everything understood under the law for a sovereign who was first in time, who is first in right, who created the federal government. We're the sovereign. We would have to be required to get the permission of an inferior in order to act. In fact, one could rightly conclude that no right exists where you have to seek permission to exercise it. Thus, it is possible for the Constitution, for the Constitution to reserve a right within the power of the people or the states, while at the same time requiring the state to get the permission of the federal officer. It's impossible for it to be So, a brief story. I've got about 10 slides left. I had a conversation with an attorney in Northeast Tennessee. And we were discussing this idea. He said, some legislature up here in Kingsport, he was talking about Representative Halsey. He says, he's proposed this ridiculous idea about nullification. Okay, he was talking to me. He didn't know I had a role in that. And it's ridiculous nullification thing. And I said, let me ask you a question. Do you believe that there is such a thing as states' rights? He said, yeah, I guess. I said, okay. If there are states' rights, what are they? And he goes, I'm not sure. I said, how would we know? Where would we look? And he said, right, I guess we'd have to look at the Constitution. I said, right, that's correct. We would have to look at the Constitution. And here's the next question. If we look at the Constitution and we find out that it's not authorized for the federal government, who has the power to say so? And then he got really quiet. This is solely about who has the power. And states quiver and quake under the threat of pretty much, unfortunately, federal dollars. We quiver and quake under federal dollars, and we sell our rights. We give away, we're Esau, selling our birthright for a mess of pottage because we're afraid we won't get federal dollars. And we give up our rights and the rights of the people to do that. We shouldn't do that. And so here's what's happening here. So look at this. Nullification is among the unalienable rights that are granted by Almighty God. The only question remaining is how do we go about it? The answer depends upon the various circumstances. Next. So our bill here basically says here are the ways we do it. First, the lawmakers can enact a law that says that federal action is to be void. Now, what's that mean? We leave it up to the General Assembly to decide what that means. Read the bill. Senator Bowling's bill basically says that you get to decide the penalties, if any, of what powers Tennessee is going to take. Remember, this bill does not nullify anything. It simply says how it is to be done. And one way to do it is that one branch of our state government can do it. We can say, that's not valid. Federal government's out of bounds. We don't have to follow that. Second, an executive. So the governor can say, an executive order, under my administration, under my executive branch, all agencies of the state are not to follow, or maybe we're going to obstruct, or maybe we're going to oppose. That's up to the executive to decide. And third, courts can issue an order that says, in the case before me, that party's not guilty. The federal government does have a right to make that law. Not guilty. The court's got a right to do that. That's nullifying with the branch. This is not, by the way, as our Attorney General said, we're messing with separation of powers. There's no separation of powers problem here. The lawmakers take care of the laws. The executive takes care of the administrative agencies in the state. The courts take care of the court case. That's what they're supposed to do. Or number 4, we can use any combination of the above. Next. I want us to take just a moment, and I mean just a moment, to look at what the Tennessee Constitution says. And you're going to see something startling here in these next slides. Next. Tennessee Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, right after our preamble, says that all power is inherent in the people, and all free governments. Free government? What's a free government? Well, Declaration of Independence says free and independent states. All free governments are founded on their authority, instituted for their peace, safety, and happiness. For the advancement of those ends, they have at all times, they the people have at all times, an unalienable and indefeasible right to alter, reform, or abolish the government in such manner as they, the people, may think proper. Then notice the next section, Section 2. That government being instituted for the common benefit, the doctrine of non-resistance against arbitrary power and oppression is absurd, slavish, and destructive of the good and happiness of mankind. If we don't resist, our Tennessee Constitution says, if we don't resist those people who take arbitrary power, they make up the rules, they reason to conclusion from the Constitution, and their reasoning happens to lead to a power grab, more things that they can decide, more things that they can do, more power that they can wield. When they happen to do that, are we at their mercy? No.
ATF coming into the people's houses and with the state. Oh, well, that sheriff needs to arrest the ATF and kick him out of that state.
Oh, in fact, we are absurd, slavish, and destructive when we sit on the sidelines and don't do something about it. That's specifically our Tennessee Constitution. And then next slide, I want you to notice, this is extremely persuasive. Consider the historical precedents of the adoption of the Tennessee Constitution. As stated in our very own Tennessee Blue Book. You guys have one? Hope you do. Go back and look at your Blue Book. Next slide. You're going to find this is what it says. It says the first Constitution of the state of Tennessee was written in Knoxville during the winter of 1796, the year the state was created, from the geographic area known as the Southwest Territory. Look at this. The first Tennessee Constitution was not put to a vote of the citizens of the new state for ratification, but was approved by Congress. You hear that? The people didn't actually ratify it. The state's version of the Continental Congress approved it. They sent it to D.C. and said, we want to be a state. And so D.C. looked at Tennessee's Constitution and says, we accept you under these terms. They ratified our state constitution, the federal government. That's shocking. Next slide. You may wonder why this historical point is significant to the topic of nullification. The answer lies in the language that Congress approved. Next. This is what our Tennessee Constitution says. We, the people of the Southwest Territory, having a right of admission to the general government as a member state thereof, consistent with the Constitution of the United States. The general government, we're going into the general government, that's consistent. We did, blah, 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 1796, ordain and establish a constitution or form of government, and look, mutually agreed, who are the parties here, okay? We mutually agreed with each other to form themselves